She stood quietly at the edge of the boarding gate, her small backpack hugged tightly to her chest. No one noticed her. People pushed past in a hurry, dragging suitcases and talking loudly on their phones. But she just stood there. Her name was Aisha. She was 14 years old, traveling alone for the first time in her life. Her eyes stayed focused on the plane outside the window, the massive silver body of it waiting in the morning light. It was beautiful, powerful, scary, and it reminded her of her father. He used to call planes skybirds. He'd say, "They don't just fly, they sing, if you know how to listen." She used to sit beside him in the old shed behind their house, while he showed her flight simulators on a cracked laptop. "This is how you land," he'd say, his voice calm, his hands steady. "This is how you listen to the wind." But that was before the accident, before the silence that took over their home. Aisha hadn't flown since then. Today she was flying to meet her uncle in another city. Her mother said it would be good for her. A change of scene, new air. But Aisha didn't want new. She wanted familiar. She wanted her dad's old leather flight jacket, his steady laugh, his voice saying, "You've got this, kiddo." Her fingers touched the edge of the small photo she kept in her hoodie pocket. It was old and bent, her dad standing next to a plane, smiling, his arm around her shoulders. He wore his pilot uniform that day. She was only 10. It felt like a different life. The boarding agent called her row. People stood and formed a line. Aisha walked slowly, letting others go ahead. When she finally reached the front, the agent looked down at her. "Flying alone?" the woman asked. Aisha nodded. "Don't worry." The agent smiled kindly. "It's a short flight, you'll be fine." Aisha didn't answer. She just clutched her bag tighter and stepped onto the jet bridge. The hum of the engines grew louder as she approached the plane's door. A flight attendant greeted her. "Welcome aboard," she said cheerfully. Aisha gave a shy nod and followed the numbers to her seat to 7A, window seat, just like her dad used to book for her. As she settled in, the woman next to her smiled. "Traveling alone?" Aisha nodded again. "You're brave," the woman said, then turned back to her magazine. Aisha looked out the window. The world outside looked calm, blue sky, shining sun, runway stretching into the distance. Her heart, however, was pounding. She could still hear her mother's voice that morning. "Don't worry, just sit quietly, don't talk to strangers, and call me as soon as you land." But her mother didn't know the fear in Aisha's chest wasn't about strangers or cities. It was about the sky. It was about being up there without him. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small, worn-out notebook, her father's old flight log. The front cover had his name written in black ink, Capt. Amir. She opened to the first page. His handwriting filled the paper dates, takeoffs, landings, wind directions. But in the back, he had left something for her. Lessons. For Aisha he had written, "So you'll know what I know." She had read those pages 100 times. They weren't technical. They were gentle, full of small tips. Always listen before you act. Trust the yoke. Never fear the wind. It's just a part of the ride. As the passengers settled in, the captain's voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 247. We're expecting a smooth ride today. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." People clapped. Aisha felt her hands tighten around the logbook. The engines roared. The plane began to move. Slowly at first, then faster. Then the moment came the wheels left the ground. She felt her stomach drop slightly. The sky opened around them. She was flying, just like she used to dream. But this time, her father wasn't beside her. A tear slid quietly down her cheek, and she wiped it away quickly, hoping no one saw. The plane leveled out. The seatbelt sign turned off. Flight attendants rolled out carts. People laughed, ordered drinks, watched movies. But Aisha didn't move. She just stared out the window, watching the clouds drift by. Minutes passed. Then a soft voice spoke beside her. "Would you like some juice?" It was a flight attendant, her eyes kind. Aisha nodded. As the woman handed her a cup, she noticed the notebook in Aisha's lap. "Is that a flight log?" she asked. Surprised, Aisha hesitated, then gave a small nod. "My dad's," she whispered. "He was a pilot." The flight attendant's face softened. "That's special," she said. "He must have been proud of you." Aisha didn't answer, but in her heart, something stirred. She sipped her juice and turned another page. Diagrams, notes, tiny sketches of cockpit controls. Her father used to draw them for her to memorize. She didn't know why she remembered them so clearly. Maybe because it was the only time she felt close to him. Maybe because he had always said, "One day, you'll need this." The plane flew. On hours passed, a few bumps here and there, nothing serious. People began to relax. Aisha closed her eyes for a moment, leaning her head against the window. Then, suddenly something changed. A strange noise. A loud jolt. People gasped. The plane dipped just slightly, but enough to make drinks spill and babies cry. The seatbelt sign blinked on. "Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts," came the captain's voice, calm but rushed. Eyes opened wide. Her hands gripped the armrests. The flight attendants moved quickly, strapping in, securing carts. The woman beside her muttered a prayer. Aisha looked around. People were tense. The plane dipped again, sharper this time. Screams echoed. The captain's voice returned, this time more urgent. We are experiencing technical issues. Please remain calm. The word technical hit Aisha like ice. She glanced at her father's notes. Always trust your instruments. Unless they stop responding, then you trust your instincts. Her breathing grew fast. The flight attendants whispered among themselves. One tried to call the cockpit. No response. A man from the front stood up, ignoring the seatbelt sign. I need to get to the cockpit, he shouted. I'm a retired air marshal. Crew tried to stop him, but he flashed an ID. Aisha watched in silence as he pushed forward. The plane shook again. People screamed louder. Some began to cry. The woman beside Aisha gripped her arm. What's happening? Aisha didn't know how to answer, but her mind was racing. She had read about these failures in her father's notes. She remembered what to check, what to try. She remembered simulator games, long nights spent learning how to handle emergencies. It was supposed to be fun back then, just pretend, just learning. But now, the pretend felt real, too real. Then came the worst jolt yet. The plane dropped, sharp and fast. Trays flew. Someone screamed, we're falling. Oxygen masks dropped from above. Chaos. Panic. But Aisha didn't move. Her hands, though shaking, reached for the logbook again. She flipped to the page marked loss of altitude procedures. Her father's words. If it ever happens for real, don't panic. Feel, think, breathe. The air marshal returned, face pale. Both pilots are down, he said quietly to the attendants. The co-pilot collapsed. The captain is gasps, screams. The crew huddled in fear. Aisha heard every word. Her heart pounded like a drum in her chest. Her hands clenched into fists. One of the crew whispered, who can fly this thing? Silence. And then, Aisha stood up. Her voice was quiet but steady. I can help. Heads turned. The air marshal blinked at her. What? Aisha swallowed. I've trained on simpias, my dad taught me. I can fly. The silence that followed was heavier than the turbulence. The air marshal stared at her like she was crazy. The flight attendant from before whispered she had a flight log. She wasn't lying. Another jolt. Screams. Time was slipping away. The air marshal looked at Aias. Really looked. You're just a kid, he said. I know, she replied, but I know what I'm doing. At least better than no one. His jaw tightened. He looked at the frightened crew, the terrified passengers, the cockpit door. Another sharp dip. A baby cried. A prayer was shouted. And then the marshal gave a slow nod. Aisha felt her knees go weak, but she walked forward, toward the cockpit, toward the unknown. Her fingers brushed the edge of her father's logbook one more time. You've got this, kiddo, she imagined. Him saying? She stepped into the cockpit. The door closed behind her. The door to the cockpit shut behind her with a soft but heavy sound. It felt like the moment everything changed. The room smelled of metal and sweat. Alarms blinked, buttons glowed. A quiet warning beep pulsed in the background like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Aisha stood at the edge, frozen. The co-pilot slumped in his chair, eyes closed, chest rising faintly. The captain, older and pale, turned his head slightly and tried to speak but only groaned. His lips moved, but no sound came. He was conscious, but weak, as if something had drained all energy from his body. One hand was still resting on the throttle. His eyes met hers briefly, confused, then faded back into a daze. The air marshal behind her whispered, we don't have much time. Can you really do this? Aisha stared at the controls in front of her. She had seen them so many times, in books, in videos, in the simulator her father had built with scrap parts and software he downloaded on slow internet nights. But this was different. This was real. Real lives, real sky, real danger. She swallowed hard and stepped closer to the seat. I think I can, she said. Her voice shook, but her eyes did not. The air marshal moved to the side and helped her. Into the co-pilot seat, she sat down, heart pounding, hands trembling. The yoke was heavier than she expected. It felt like holding someone's heartbeat. She looked around, trying to find familiar patterns. The speed indicator, altitude, artificial horizon. They were all there, but some were flashing warnings. She took a breath, deep, steady. Her father had always said, the first thing a pilot does in an emergency is breathe, not act breathe. Her fingers moved slowly, touching the dials like they were old friends. The altitude meter was dropping fast. They were descending quicker than they should. If it kept going like this, they would hit sea level in minutes. She looked out the cockpit window. Clouds rolled by in streaks, no city lights, no ground, just sky and whispers of wind. She tried to speak into the mic. Mayday, Mayday, this is Flight 247. We have an emergency. Both pilots are down. Does anyone copy? Static, then silence. She tried again. This is Aisha, a passenger. I am in the cockpit. I repeat, both pilots are down. Nothing, no voice, no help. The comms weren't connecting. Maybe the radio system was damaged. She tapped the screen again. Still nothing. The air marshal leaned in. Any luck? She shook her head. Not yet. Do you know where we are? I can try to figure it out, she said, scanning the flight path. Her father's logbook sat open beside her. She had marked one of the pages with a red sticker, emergency descent recovery. Her eyes followed the instructions. Level the wings, check speed, adjust flaps. Her hands moved cautiously, doing what the page said. The plane responded, not fully, but enough to feel the tension ease. Altitude stabilizing, she whispered to herself. The marshal let out a breath. That's something. Behind them, the flight attendants waited, whispering updates into the cabin. A girl is in the cockpit, one of them said quietly. She's flying the plane. Passengers gasped. Some cried harder. Others sat in shock, holding hands, praying. A little boy near the back whispered to his mother, "She's just a kid. Can kids fly planes?" The mother held him tightly and said nothing. But in the cockpit, the kid was trying. Aisha flipped through the logbook again, searching for navigation, backup steps. Her father's scribbles were messy but clear. If the map screen fails, trust your bearing and clock. East at sunrise, west at sunset. North smells like snow. He was always poetic, even in technical notes. She smiled faintly, remembering him pointing at the stars from their rooftop. You don't need a compass if you can feel the wind. Her hand touched the rudder controls. She could feel slight pull to the left. Wind drift, she adjusted gently. The plane responded, still shaking, but less now. She looked over at the unconscious co-pilot. He moaned softly, still alive, still breathing, but helpless. She looked at the captain. He blinked, then whispered something. She leaned closer. What? You fly, he said, barely audible. Trying, she whispered. He gave a weak nod, then said, avionics, fail, back up, switch, and pointed vaguely to the lower left. She searched, found a small toggle marked Nav 2, come to. She flipped it, a soft beep, then crackling in her headset. Flight 247, do you read? A deep voice said through the static. Relief flooded her body like a wave. She nearly cried. Yes, this is Flight 247. Both pilots are down. I'm not a pilot, I'm just a passenger, but I know some flight training. Repeat your name, the voice said calmly. Aisha Amir. Silence. Then the voice returned. You're Amir's daughter. She blinked in shock. You knew my dad. I flew with him. The man said long time ago he was one of the best. Taught me things I still use. Aisha's eyes filled with tears. I need help, she said. I have control, but I don't know how long I can hold altitude. We were heading to Lahore, but I don't see the city lights. You're off course, the voice said gently. We've been trying to track your signal. You've drifted nearly 70 kilometers west, but you're not far from an old airbase. Small, but landable. Can you try to hold heading 110? Aisha glanced at the compass. She adjusted. The plane responded. Done. Good, maintain that. Keep steady descent. We're guiding you and... The marshal smiled faintly. You're doing it? He whispered. Aisha's hands trembled, but she gripped the yoke. Her dad's voice rang in her ears. Don't just fly, feel. She adjusted pressure, controlled tilt, monitored gauges. The plane held steady. Outside, the storm clouds were returning, darker this time. Lightning flashed in the distance. The voice on the radio warned, storm approaching. You'll have about 10 minutes to land before visibility drops. Understood, she said. I'll try. He paused. No try. Aisha, do I know who your father was? That gave her strength. Her father had believed in her, even when she hadn't believed in herself. Her hands gripped tighter. Her focus narrowed. She adjusted flaps, lowered speed. The base came into view, small strip of lights between dark fields. There it is, she whispered. I see it. Good, begin slow descent. Don't rush. Watch your speed. Passengers held hands in silence. Some prayed, some cried. But a strange calm had filled the cabin. They had hope now. Hope flying the plane in a hoodie and jeans. A small girl with a big heart. The wheels came. Down. Aisha felt the shudder beneath her feet. Her mind flashed to her dad's training again. Don't force the landing. Let the ground come to you. She slowed further. Aligned with the runway. Wind howled outside. Lights flickered. But she held. You're almost there, the voice said. Just a little more. Her breath came slow. Her fingers moved like they were guided by memory, not fear. The ground rose beneath them. Closer, closer. Then touchdown, a bump, a bounce. Then wheels. Connected fully. The plane raced along the strip. She pulled back gently. Slowed. Braked. The plane rolled to a stop. Silence in the cabin. People didn't move at first. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then all at once cheers, sobs, hands in the air. The air marshal opened the cockpit door and stepped out. We've landed, he said simply. Thanks to a 14-year-old girl. Crew members hugged. Passengers cried. Someone shouted, she saved us. But inside the cockpit, Aisha sat still, staring ahead, her hand still on the controls. Her body shook as the adrenaline wore off. A single tear fell onto her lap. She whispered, I did it, Papa. Outside, emergency lights flashed. Vehicles approached. The retired pilot's voice came through the radio one last time. You did good, Aisha. Your father would be proud. We all are. Her eyes closed briefly. She felt the cockpit fade away. For a second she was back in the shed, a child again, laughing with her father, and then the moment passed. She had flown a plane, saved lives, and now, she was ready to open the door. The moment the plane came to a complete stop, Aisha felt her arms lose all strength. Her hand slipped off the yoke and fell into her lap. Her whole body began to shake. She was trembling so hard she couldn't move. Her mind was racing, but her body was frozen. The cockpit was still humming with low beeps and blinking lights, but everything else outside felt silent. Too silent. For a second, she thought maybe she was dreaming, that none of this was real, but the weight of the headset around her neck, the sweat on her forehead, and the tears still wet on her cheeks told her otherwise. She had landed a plane. She had done the unthinkable. Alone, a kid, a passenger. But it wasn't over yet. The cockpit door opened and the air marshal stepped in. He looked at her like he was looking at someone unreal. Someone out of a storybook. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Barely." "You did it," he whispered, still in disbelief. "You actually did it." Aisha looked down at her lap. Her fingers were red from how hard she'd been gripping the controls. The flight logbook rested against her leg, open to the last page. Her father's final note: "If you ever need to fly alone, just remember, you are never really alone. I'm with you." She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Papa." Outside, flashing emergency lights lit up the night. Fire, ambulances, and police vehicles surrounded the plane. The crew quickly opened the cabin door. Emergency workers climbed in, checking the passengers one by one. No major injuries, no one harmed, just shaken. Inside the cabin, passengers looked toward the cockpit with a mix of confusion and awe. They had heard the announcement, but hadn't seen her. Some expected to see a young pilot in uniform. But when Aisha stepped out of the cockpit, small, pale, hair messy, wearing a simple hoodie and sneakers, the entire cabin fell into stunned silence. She looked out at the people. Some of them had screamed earlier, some had prayed, some had cried. Now all of them stared at her with the same expression, disbelief, turning into respect. A little girl near the front seat whispered loudly, "She's just a kid." An older man near the back stood and clapped. Others followed. In moments the whole cabin was filled with clapping and cheering. Aisha didn't know where to look. She felt like running and hiding, but she stood still, letting the moment wash over her. One of the flight attendants, the same woman who had first offered her juice, came forward. Her eyes were filled with tears. "You saved us," she said softly. "You saved all of us." Aisha shook her head. I did what my dad taught me." The woman put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then your dad raised a hero." Emergency staff rushed into the cockpit to check on the captain and co-pilot. They were both alive but needed immediate medical help. The captain was barely conscious. But when he saw Aisha standing beside him, he gave a weak smile and whispered, "Good job, kid." Aisha felt tears rise again. Outside, the steps were rolled up to the plane and passengers began to disembark. Many of them stopped to thank her, some hugged her, others just stared at her with wide eyes. The media had already arrived. Cameras flashed, reporters were shouting, "Who is the young girl who saved Flight 257? Did she really land the plane? How old is she? Was she trained?" Aisha felt overwhelmed. She tried to hide behind the crew, but someone pulled her gently aside. It was the retired pilot, the voice who had guided her during the descent. He was older, maybe in his late 50s, with silver hair and kind eyes. He held out his hand and said, "I'm Captain Zubair. I flew with your father." Aisha looked at him, eyes wide. "You knew him." "Better than most," Zubair replied. "We trained together when we were young. I still remember his stories about you." Aisha blinked. "He talked about me every day." Zubair smiled. "He said you had a pilot's eyes. He said, one day you'd take to the skies in ways the world wouldn't believe." She lowered her head to hide her tears. "I didn't think I'd fly like this." Captain Zubair placed a hand on her shoulder. "You flew when it mattered most. That takes more than training. That takes courage. That takes heart." A small group of reporters surrounded them. "Are you her coach?" one asked. "Are you her trainer?" Zubair shook his head. "She trained with someone far greater than me, her father." Aisha stayed quiet. The weight of the moment was still sinking in. Another woman approached, tall, in a dark uniform. She introduced herself as a senior representative from aviation security. "We need to debrief you, Aisha," she said softly. "It won't take long. But after what happened up there, the whole world will want answers." Aisha didn't want the world, she just wanted sleep. But she nodded and followed them into the airport building. The room was small and quiet. 2 chairs, 1 table, a bottle of water. The official sat down across from her and said, "First, let me say thank you. What you did tonight saved lives. You showed the kind of bravery that most trained adults can't." Aisha said nothing. The woman continued, "But we need to understand how you were able to do it. Were you trained?" Aisha pulled out the old logbook. "My dad taught me," she said. "He used to fly. He made simulators at home. He said one day, I might need it." The official opened the book, flipping through the notes. "These are detailed." "Did he teach you every procedure?" "Almost everything." Aisha nodded. "We used to pretend emergencies. I thought it was just for fun, but I remembered." The woman smiled. "Do you know you're trending on every news channel in the country right now?" Aisha's eyes widened. "What? Because you're a 14-year-old girl who took control of a passenger plane and landed it safely after both pilots went down. People are calling you a hero, but I'm not, Aisha said softly. I was scared. That's what makes you one. The woman replied, bravery isn't about not feeling fear. It's about choosing to act in spite of it. After the interview, Aisha was taken to a small lounge to rest. She curled up in a chair, hugging her backpack. Her mother was already on a flight, rushing to get to her. Her uncle had called 3 times. News channels kept playing the same clips over and over. A young girl lands plane, saves 112 lives. Mystery hero identified. In one clip, a journalist said, she didn't even tell anyone she could fly. She just stood up when it mattered. Aisha didn't want to watch. She turned her face into the pillow and closed her eyes. Later that night, someone tapped her shoulder gently. She opened her eyes to see Captain Zubair standing there again. He had a small box in his hands. This belonged to your father, he said. He left it with me years ago. Said to give it to you when the time was right. Aisha slowly opened. The box inside was a pair of golden pilot wings. Old, worn, beautiful, and under them a small handwritten note. For my daughter, who was born to fly. Aisha couldn't speak. She just stared at the wings, her heart aching and full all at once. He knew, she whispered. He always knew. Zubair nodded. Yes. And tonight? So does the world. Just then, the door opened. Her mother walked in, eyes red from crying, face pale from worry. Aisha stood slowly. Her mother rushed to her, wrapping her in the tightest hug she had ever felt. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then finally, her mother pulled back and looked her in the eyes. You saved all those people, she said. You flew that? Plane how? Aisha looked down at the wings in her hand, then back at her mother. I didn't want to, she said, but I had to. Her mother nodded through tears. You're your father's daughter, and in that moment, Aisha felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not fear, not pain, not even pride, but peace. She had carried her father's memory in her heart, and tonight, it had guided her hands through the clouds. The sky had tested her, and she had answered. Not as a child, not even as a hero, but as a daughter of the wind. The sun had barely risen, but the airport was already buzzing with cameras, reporters, and crowds. Aisha sat by the window in the small lounge where officials had asked her to wait. Her hoodie still smelled like the cockpit. Her fingers still trembled if she didn't hold them together. Outside the glass, media vans rolled into position. Microphones, lights, news crews all waiting for one thing. The girl who flew inside. Aisha didn't feel like a hero. She felt tired, empty, like her mind was still floating 30,000 feet above. She hadn't eaten, she hadn't slept. Her mother sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. You don't have to talk to anyone, her mother said. You did enough. We'll go home soon, Aisha nodded. But her eyes stayed fixed on the tarmac outside, where the plane she landed was still parked. It looked smaller now, just metal and wings, but in her memory, it still shook with thunder. Captain Zubair walked in quietly and sat across from them. There's something you should know, he said. The aviation board is gathering in the next few hours. They want to honor you, medal certificate, all of it. Aisha blinked. Why? Because you didn't just fly a plane. You saved 112 people. You kept calm when trained adults froze. Aisha lowered her eyes. I was scared. Zubair smiled and still. You flew. That's the kind of courage the world needs to see. Her mother looked proud, but worried too. Will it go away? She asked. Will the attention stop? Not for a while, Zubair said. But we'll protect her, I promise. A knock on the glass caught their attention. A man from civil aviation waved them over. They're ready. Just a few photos. Then she can rest. Aisha stood, shoulders tense. She didn't want flashes or microphones. She wanted silence. A quiet place. Her father shed, but she followed. Outside, the media went silent the moment she stepped into view. Cameras clicked, lights flashed, but no one shouted questions. No one pushed forward. There was something about her presence, small, quiet, serious, that made the crowd pause. A news anchor whispered, "There she is." A journalist murmured, "She doesn't even look 14. Aisha walked forward slowly, her mother and Zubair on either side. A stage had been set up near the hangars. Officials waited, their uniformed, polished, with medals on their chests. One of them stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we stand here today to honor an extraordinary act of courage. When Flight 247 lost its pilots, and fear swept the cabin, it was not an adult, not a trained officer, but a 14-year-old girl who rose from her seat, walked into the cockpit, and did the impossible. The crowd listened in silence. She did not ask for attention. She did not wait for praise. She simply did what had to be done. Today, we recognize Aisha Amir for saving lives, restoring hope, and reminding us all that greatness does not wait for age. Aisha was called forward. As she stepped up, the applause began, soft at first, then rising like a wave. The official pinned a small gold medal on her jacket and handed her a certificate. "Thank you," he said, looking her in the eyes. "The skies are safer with you in them." Aisha didn't speak. She just nodded, a small smile. Then she turned and walked back down. The crowd didn't cheer loudly. They respected the silence she carried, A weight, a memory, a truth. Back inside, Zubair brought her a small paper bag. Eat something, he said. Toast, juice, you'll feel better. Aisha took the toast, but didn't eat right away. Can I ask something? She said softly. Zubair nodded. Why did the pilots go down? Zubair sighed. We're still investigating. The co-pilot had low blood pressure. He likely fainted. The captain may have had a minor stroke, maybe stress, maybe something else, but they'll survive. Aisha nodded. What if I hadn't gotten up? Zubair looked at her. Then today would be a very different story. That answer stayed in her chest like a stone. The next day, the headlines exploded. 14-year-old girl saves 112 lives midair. The silent hero of Flight 247. Daughter of a pilot, heart of steel. Her name was everywhere. TV shows asked for interviews. Magazines offered covers. A school offered her a scholarship. Another offered her pilot training for free. But Aisha said no to everything. She didn't want lights, or interviews, or applause. She wanted peace. She wanted to sit on the rooftop again, look at the stars, and remember the man who taught her to fly before she even knew what flying meant. One afternoon, a few days later, she walked into her father's old shed. It was dusty, untouched. The simulator still sat in the corner, covered with a sheet. She pulled it off slowly. Buttons, screens, wires. It looked like a toy compared to the real cockpit. But to her, it was sacred. She sat down in the chair, closed her eyes. Her fingers found the controls like they never left. She whispered, altitude 30,000, wind east, clear skies. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. That's it, kiddo. Let the sky carry you. Her hand moved the throttle gently. The screen lit up. The simulator beeped. And for a moment, she was flying again, not to save, not to survive, but just to feel, just to remember, just to be free. Her mother stood in the doorway, watching silently. Then she walked in, sat beside her, and said, Do you want to fly again? I mean for real. Aisha looked up, thought for a moment. I don't know. You don't have to decide now, her mother said. But whatever you choose, I'll be with you. Aisha smiled. He said that too. Her mother nodded, blinking back tears. He was right. That night, Aisha sat on the roof with a blanket and a warm mug. She stared at the stars, listening. To the soft wind, the world had changed. Everyone knew her name now, but she didn't feel different. She still missed her dad. Still remembered the way he whistled when he made tea. The way he pointed at clouds and said, That one looks like a dragon. Her eyes drifted to the brightest star. I flew. Papa, she whispered. I really did. And for the first time since he left, she felt like maybe, just maybe, he heard her. The plane trembled again, more violently this time. Screams echoed through the cabin. Babies cried. A coffee cup flew from a tray and hit a man in the aisle. The oxygen masks still dangled, swinging back and forth like silent warnings. The sky outside had turned darker, clouds pressing hard against the windows like giant hands. Emma clutched the edge of her seat. Her mind raced, heart pounded, but her face remained still. Somewhere deep inside, her father's voice echoed, and slow. Remember what I told you. Fear doesn't help the plane. Knowledge does. She slowly unbuckled her seatbelt. A flight attendant, her face pale with fear, looked up at Emma in surprise. Sit down. We're in turbulence. Emma stood, tall, gripping the headrest. Where's the cockpit? I need to speak with the captain. The flight attendant blinked. What? Emma's voice didn't shake. Please, I can help. I know what to do. Another jolt hit the plane. The captain's voice came on barely. Ladies and passengers, we're trying to. The message cut. Static followed. The intercom fizzled into silence. The flight attendant whispered, What is happening? Then she looked back at Emma. You're a kid. Emma reached into her backpack and pulled out the old pilot logbook. She opened it to the page where her father's handwriting filled the line. Simulator hours. Practice checklists. Emergency landings. She showed it to the woman. My dad trained me. I know how to fly. Just let me talk to them. Before the flight attendant could respond, a voice from the back shouted, She's right. It was the air marshal, the one with the square jaw and eyes that had seen too much. He stepped forward, limping slightly. I saw her during training. Her dad was Captain Amir, one of the best I ever met. The flight attendant looked stunned. She's not just a kid, the air marshal said. She's a pilot's daughter, and right now we've got no pilot in control, and a plane full of people. So let her try. The crew looked at each other, fear flashing between them, but then the flight attendant nodded, slowly. Follow me. Emma followed down the narrow hallway, her hands shaking now, but not from fear only, from the weight of what she was about to do. The door to the cockpit was locked. The air marshal stepped forward and punched in the emergency override code. The door opened. The co-pilot lay slumped over, unconscious. His headset dangled loosely, one earpiece sparking. The captain was still seated, but breathing heavily, in no shape to fly. A clipboard had fallen between his feet. The control panel blinked with warning lights. Altitude, fuel, navigation, failure, more alerts than anyone would want to see at 30,000 feet. Emma stepped inside. The air smelled of sweat, metal, and something burning, maybe an overheating wire. Her heart skipped, but she moved with purpose. She sat in the co-pilot's seat, just like she had 100 times in the simulator with her father beside her. Her fingers moved without thinking. First, stabilize. She scanned the control panel. Her voice was low, but steady. Autopilot's gone. I'm taking manual control. The air marshal stood behind her, watching. We're counting on you. She nodded. Her small hands gripped the yoke. Her fingers felt the familiar vibration of the controls. Slight, alive, heavy with responsibility. She reached over to adjust the trim, checked the altitude again, and gently pulled up. The plane responded, not fully, but enough to stop the steep dip. A few seconds passed. The plane leveled slightly. The intercom system buzzed. Emma pressed the button and spoke, her voice echoing through the cabin. This is Emma. I'm in the cockpit. We're stabilizing. Please stay calm. There was silence. Then a small sound from the cabana cheer. Someone clapped. Someone cried. She didn't hear the words, but she felt the hope rise from behind the cockpit door. She wasn't done yet. She turned to the radios, scanning frequencies. Mayday. This is Flight 272. We have an emergency. Captain and co-pilot, incapacitated. I'm taking control. Repeat, this is a mayday. Requesting assistance. The radio hissed back nothing, only static. She tried again. This is an emergency request. Anyone read me? Nothing. The air marshal frowned. Try the backup. She switched channels. Mayday. Mayday. Flight 272. A crackle. Then a voice, old, deep, familiar. Flight 272. This is Ground Station Echo Bravo. Who is flying that plane? Emma froze. Her heart leaped. My name is Emma. Emma Amir. My father, he was Captain Amir. Silence. Then, I flew with him. Years ago, he told me about you. Kid with a brain like a storm. What's your status? Emma swallowed. Lost autopilot. Fuel's low. I'm stabilizing at 28,000 feet. I need a course to the nearest landing strip. Copy that. Can you handle descent and landing? Emma took a breath. Yes, sir, I can. The voice responded firmly. Then listen close. We're gonna bring you home. She turned to the control panel, her hands steady now. Her eyes scanned everything like her father taught her step by step. Don't guess, think. Remember your training. Feel the aircraft out behind her. The air marshal wiped his eyes and turned away, so no one would see. Emma adjusted heading, as the voice from the ground guided her through a new route. We're redirecting you to a small private airfield lot. Traffic. Easier runway. You're 22 minutes out. She did the math in her head. That'll take me close to minimum fuel. Can you make it? She didn't hesitate. Yes. She began the gradual descent. The clouds outside thickened. Rain pelted the windows like drum beats. A flash of lightning in the distance lit the cockpit briefly. The controls began to vibrate harder. The plane jolted once more, then shook violently. We're hitting a storm pocket, Emma yelled. Stay calm, said the voice. Keep your hands firm. Don't fight the wind guide with it. She did as instructed, her knuckles white, but her grip firm. Her eyes stayed locked on the instruments. The old panel her father had taught her on suddenly flashed in her memory. Same layout, same gauges, her father's voice. Don't just look. Feel the story behind the dials. She adjusted pitch and throttle, nudging the plane forward like a tired bird returning home. The air marshal leaned close. You're doing something no one ever believed a kid could do. I'm not just a kid, she whispered. I'm a pilot's daughter. Outside, the clouds parted for a moment, and far below, a small strip of lights blinked faintly in the dark. The runway. The ground controller came back. We see you. You're on course. Begin approach pattern. Winds are westward. Be careful. Emma began the pattern. Every move now muscle memory. The descent was slow, painful, and loud but controlled. Suddenly, an alert. Fuel low, very low. Emma's face tensed. The lights on the control panel blinked like a countdown. She spoke into the radio. Fuel's below safety margin. I have one. The controller paused. Then take it. The sky is yours. Emma's hands moved faster. Now landing gear down. Flaps adjusted. The plane shuddered. The nose dipped. Altitude. 3,000, 2,000, 1,000. Rain splattered across the windshield. Her heart pounded. Her breath was steady. Come on, she whispered. Behind the door, passengers held hands. Some prayed. Some just waited. 500 feet. She felt the plane sink, then glide. The runway was closer. 300 feet. She made the final adjustment. The wheels touched down rough, but solid. Brakes engaged. The plane skidded slightly, then slowed, then stopped. Silence. For a moment. Everything was still. Then cheers erupted behind the door. Emma sat frozen, hands still on the controls. Her chest rose and fell. A tear ran down her cheek, but she smiled. The controller's voice came one last time. You did it, Emma. The air marshal clapped a hand on her shoulder. Your dad would have been proud. Emma turned to him, her eyes soft. He was with me the whole way. Outside, the emergency, vehicles, rolled in. Flashing lights. People running, news already spreading. But inside the cockpit, there was just a girl. A girl who had flown them through a storm. A girl no one knew until now. And far above, in the quiet sky, the storm cleared. Emma closed her eyes and whispered, Thank you, Dad. The cockpit door was heavy. It creaked slightly as the air marshal pushed it open. The narrow space smelled like plastic, sweat, and metal. The seat where the captain had once sat was now empty. The co-pilot was unconscious, slumped to the side, his headset half falling off. Alarms blinked red on every surface, the plane shuddered under another wave of turbulence. Maya stood frozen just outside the door, her fingers trembling. You really want to do this? The air marshal asked one last time, his voice rough. Maya nodded. Yes, she said, barely louder than a whisper. I have to. She stepped inside, slowly. The crew cleared space behind her, watching in silent disbelief. A 14-year-old girl walking into the cockpit. Maya climbed into the co-pilot's seat. Her hands hovered over the controls. She had done this before, but never for real. Only in simulators, only in the quiet of her room, with her dad's voice guiding her through practice. Now she was alone. The seat felt too big, the controls too far, but her body moved with muscle memory. She touched the throttle gently, checked the altitude indicator. Her father's voice echoed in her head. Trim first. Always trim. Make the plane fly you before you fly it. She adjusted the stabilizer trim slightly. The shuddering eased just a little, a small win. She didn't say anything. Her heart was beating too loud. The air marshal handed her the captain's headset. She slid it on. Static, just static. Can you hear anything? He asked. Maya shook her head. I'll try to reset the radio. She reached under the panel where she had seen her dad reach so many times, fingers brushing against the right switch. Click, another burst of static, then silence, then a faint voice. Flight 307. Do you copy? Maya sat up straight. This is Flight 307. We have a medical emergency. Both pilots are down. She paused. What would they think? A child's voice on the line, she continued. I'm acting pilot, requesting emergency assistance. There was a pause. Then a sharp, professional voice. Identify yourself. Who's speaking? Maya closed her eyes for a second, then spoke calmly. Maya Abbas, civilian. I've trained on Boeing simulators. I'm 14. I know it sounds impossible, but I need your help to land this aircraft. The silence on the line felt eternal. Then, understood. Maya, stay calm. We're going to guide you in. What is your current altitude? She looked down. 33,000 feet, descending slowly. Good. Maintain current heading. We're clearing the closest runway for emergency landing. You're not alone. The words made Maya want to cry, but she didn't have time. She adjusted the autopilot setting, making sure it held steady. The systems were glitchy, and the turbulence kept interfering, but she was focused now. Every sound, every shake of the plane told her something. She was reading the aircraft's language, and slowly, the aircraft was listening. Behind her, the crew was watching in quiet awe. One flight attendant whispered, "She's actually doing it." The passengers still didn't know what was happening. The intercom was off. The air marshal leaned in and asked, "Should we tell them?" Maya thought for a second. Not yet. If I mess this up, panic will only make things worse. Give me 5 minutes of calm. He nodded. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. In that time, Maya went over the checklist her father taught her. She checked flaps, fuel, electrical, flight path, wind speed. The right engine was slightly off calibration. She adjusted. A warning light flashed, cabin pressure fluctuation. She activated secondary oxygen supply. She was doing things she had only ever imagined doing, and she wasn't frozen in fear. She was moving, deciding, flying. The voice from ATC came again. Maya, do you have visual contact on the coast? She looked out the cockpit window. Yes, I see water, and land on the left side. That's your vector. You're over Turkey. We're rerouting traffic. You'll head toward Adana. Runway 23L is being cleared. It's a long strip. You'll have space. Copy, she said, like her father taught her. Runway 23L heading received. And then, the co-pilot groaned. Maya jolted in her seat. She looked over. His eyes fluttered open weakly. You, who? He whispered. She didn't know what to say. Sir, I'm Maya. You're injured. Please don't move. He looked confused but didn't resist. He saw the controls, the plane holding steady. Then he looked at her hands, and nodded faintly. Okay, you fly. The turbulence was back. A sharp roll shook the plane, and passengers screamed again. Maya gripped the yoke. It's okay, she told herself. Ride the waves, ride it. She leveled out the wings. Her breathing was shallow. Come on, Maya, just like Dad said. Calm is everything, the plane responded. It was alive, but it wasn't fighting her. Suddenly the air marshal handed her a tablet. Someone's trying to get through to you. A video link. A fuzzy face appeared, an older man in a pilot's uniform. Maya? He said. Shocked, sir, she asked. I'm Captain Parvez. I flew with your father. I trained with him. They called me when your name came up. Maya's throat tightened. He always said you were the best he ever flew with. The old man chuckled. He said the same about you. She blinked fast, trying to stay focused. Captain, I don't know if I can do this. You can, he said firmly, and I'm going to help you, step by step, starting now. Look at the glide slope. She nodded, rechecking instruments. Your descent is clean, but the storm's ahead. You're going to have to fly manually soon. Okay, I'm right here, just like he would have been. Another burst of lightning flashed outside. The clouds were getting denser. You'll hit that storm wall in 10 minutes, ATC warned. Visibility might drop. Wind shear risk is high. Understood, Maya said. She looked out the window again. The clouds didn't scare her anymore. She had already made it this far. Begin descent to 20,000 feet, Captain Parvez instructed. She adjusted the controls. The engines groaned. She felt the pressure shift in her chest. The cockpit lights flickered. Keep going, you've got this. The radio crackled again. Flight 37, descend to 15,000. You're now 10 minutes. From runway, Maya responded. Her hands moved faster now, more confident. Her eyes sharp, her breathing steady. She glanced back at the unconscious captain, then at the crew. They were depending on her. An entire plane was in her hands. But, instead of fear, she felt fire. She wasn't the girl in seat 27A anymore. She was the one flying. The clouds thickened outside, visibility dropped. Lightning flashed again. Storm front ahead, ATC confirmed. Do you wish to divert? Maya shook her head. No, we go. Through Captain Parvez's voice came. You're your father's daughter. I'm proud of you. Maya began prepping for manual flight. She adjusted altitude, turned off auto throttle. The aircraft pitched slightly. She corrected quickly. Wind speed rising, ATC said. You're doing well. Keep her balanced. Maya gritted her teeth. I won't let them down. The cockpit lights flickered again, then a soft alarm. Low fuel warning. Captain, we're losing fuel. Parvez's face tightened. You'll make it. Trust your path. Cut extra systems. Power to engines only. She obeyed. Cabin lights dimmed. Cabin crew reported back. Passengers were praying now, holding hands. The air marshal quietly whispered. To her, you're saving lives. Kid, just thought you should know. Maya didn't respond. She couldn't. Her eyes stayed on the approaching storm wall. Her fingers tightened. The cloud swallowed the plane whole. Darkness, don't leave her instruments now. No outside vision. Maya, rely on your attitude indicator. Trust your gear. She nodded. I'm flying blind, she whispered, but not lost. The plane shook violently. Lightning cracked. Alarms screamed. Ride it, she repeated. The plane pitched down. She pulled up just enough. Too much and you'll stall, Parvez warned. She eased off, took a deep breath. The storm began to fade. The clouds lightened, dot and by lights, city lights, runway lights. Maya, runway 23L is in sight. Begin final descent. Copy. Her voice was steel now. Not a child's, a pilot's. She lowered the landing gear. A loud clunk. Green light. Good sign. Flaps set. Check. Parvez confirmed. Altitude, 4,000 feet. Level your nose. Roger. 3,000 feet. Ease. Throttled doing it. 2,000 feet now glide. 1,000 feet. Maya's hands were steady. Runway dead ahead. Brace for landing. She said into the intercom. We're going in. The wheels touched. A screech dot bounce dot correction dot. She held the nose level. Then, the plane slowed, screamed, shook, then dash stopped. Silence, only the hiss of brakes. Cooling, then the sound of hands. Clapping, crying, cheering. Maya sat frozen, her heart raced. Her hands were shaken. The headset slid off. Captain Parvez's voice was still in her ear. You did it. Your father would have cried. Just like I am now. Maya took off the headset. The cockpit door opened, and, for the first time in hours, she smiled. She sat in the cockpit, her heart pounding louder than the alarms blaring around her. Outside the windshield, the clouds swirled violently, like a warning. Inside, oxygen masks dangled. Passengers sobbed and prayed, and the girl just 14. Her grip on the controls. She was no pilot, not officially, but she had flown before, not in the sky, but in her father's basement. Hours and hours of simulation, side by side with the man she missed the most. Her father, Captain Amir Khan, a pilot who was more than just a flyer. He was her hero. And now, in the silence left behind by a collapsed captain and an unconscious co-pilot, she had no one else to rely on but his voice in her head. Do not panic. Breathe. Trust the instruments, not the noise. The air marshal sat behind her, tense, his fingers ready to react, but he didn't stop her. Something about the calm in her eyes had convinced him, or maybe it was just desperation. The lead flight attendant whispered, "Can she really do this?" And the marshal replied quietly, "We're out of choices." The radio crackled, static, then nothing. The emergency signal was jammed or too weak to reach anyone. The screen blinked red. Nav system error. The compass spun like a toy. Autopilot was long gone, but she remembered, the simulator didn't have autopilot either. Her father said, "You have to feel the plane, know what it wants." With a deep breath, she nudged the yoke gently. The plane responded, just barely. Heavy, tired, but still alive. She adjusted the throttle, watching the horizon level out just a little, enough to buy time. Then came the memory. Her 6th birthday, she had asked for a Barbie airplane, but her dad got her a flight joystick instead. "You don't play with planes," he said. "You fly them." And she had tried, fumbling, confused, but he didn't laugh. He sat beside her, adjusting her hands. "Now try again." That moment was alive in her now. She wasn't just a scared girl anymore. She was his student. She looked at the instrument panel again. Her fingers hesitated, then tapped in a code her father had taught her. The old backup nav system blinked awake, like a ghost from the past. The coordinates flashed. They weren't perfect, but better than nothing. Meanwhile, in the cabin, chaos still ruled. A mother rocked her baby with trembling hands. A businessman shouted into his phone, trying to call someone, anyone. An old woman clutched her rosary. Fear united them all. But one passenger stood out. A boy about her age, looked toward the cockpit. With wide eyes, he had been watching since the moment she stepped forward. He wasn't scared of her. He was in awe. And that quiet hope in his gaze gave her strength. The storm outside thickened. Wind slammed against the fuselage. The plane shuddered violently, nearly throwing her off balance. But she held on. Okay, she whispered to herself. We've done crosswind landings in the simulator, Dad said. ... Stay light on the rudder. Another flash of memory. Her father's voice in her ear. Feel the wings. Don't fight the wind. Dance with it. She adjusted the rudder pedals, nudging left, then correcting right. The plane leaned but didn't tip. Good. Still stable. Then. From behind her, a familiar voice crackled faintly through the static. If anyone can hear this, respond. She froze that voice. She leaned toward the mic. This is passenger to 7A. We have a crisis. Captain is down, co-pilot down. I'm flying. Silence. Then again, the voice replied, Who is this? Repeat. She swallowed hard. My name is Liana. I'm 14. I've trained on simulators with my father, Captain Amir Khan. Static. Again. Then. Liana Amir's daughter. She gasped. Uncle Faisal, her father's old flight partner. The man who visited after the funeral with tears in his eyes and a promise. If you ever need me, call. I'm here, he said, his voice shaking. Where are you? What's your altitude? She looked. 28,000, heading southwest. But instruments are glitching. Okay, listen to me carefully, he said. You're doing something amazing. Just breathe. I'm going to guide you down. Do you trust me? Yes, she said, her voice steady. Meanwhile, the air marshal sat stunned. He had expected chaos. He hadn't expected a child commanding a plane midstorm with the confidence of someone twice her age. Uncle Faisal gave her new coordinates. You need to start descending slowly. Bring her down to 22,000 over the next 5 minutes. I'll clear the route. She followed his instructions, fingers nimble, heart pounding. Every dial, every button felt familiar yet foreign, but she didn't waver. The boy in the cabin watched the cockpit door, leaning forward. People around him were too terrified to notice the shift, but he saw it. The plane was stabilizing. Then, a sudden jolt, a loud bang echoed as lightning struck. Nearby, warning lights flashed. She's okay? Liana said out loud, not sure if it was for the crew or herself. She's strong. The air marshal asked. Liana smiled faintly. I always named my simulator plane Zoya means life. He didn't argue. Uncle Faisal came back on the radio. You have a choice? The nearest runway is 40 minutes away, longer descent, but less storm. Or you risk the shorter airport, 25 minutes but through the eye of the storm. She closed her eyes. Her father had warned her about choices like this. Go with the option that gives people a better chance, he'd said, even if it's harder for you. She spoke into the radio. We'll take the longer route. Faisal's voice cracked. Just like your father. Proud of you. Tears welled up, but she blinked them away. The descent began. She adjusted flaps, readjusted throttle. The plane responded beautifully, as if it, too, trusted her. Outside, the clouds slowly parted. Not much, but enough to see streaks of golden light peeking through. In the cabin, the tension eased slightly. People still cried, but a quiet calm was settling. Somewhere deep inside, they felt it. Something had changed. The flight attendant knocked softly. How are we doing? We're going to land, Liana said, but we need to hold steady. And just then another flashback struck her. Her last simulator run with her dad. He had said, one day, you might be in the sky for real, and if that day comes, don't fly for glory. Fly to save. She looked at the controls. Then at the clouds. We're saving lives, Dad. But just when things started to feel hopeful, the old nav system blinked again and shut off. Black screen. The backup was dead. Faisal backup is gone, she shouted. I'm getting you visuals from the tower, but I can't see your heading. The girl closed her eyes. Remembered every lesson, every compass bearing, every wind pattern. I'm going manual, she said. The air marshal gasped. You sure? No, she whispered, but I have to try. The storm wasn't done yet. One final wall of clouds loomed ahead. She gritted her teeth. Hold together, Zoya. The plane shook violently. Screams erupted again. Then silence, a moment of total calm. The eye of the storm? She took a breath, corrected the angle, and pushed forward. Faisal's voice came through once more, faint but clear. You're almost through. Just hold on. And as she did, the plane burst through the last curtain of clouds into open skies and below them. The first glimpse of a runway glittered like a promise. But fuel was dropping fast. Her voice broke as she whispered, We're not there yet, and the screen faded to black. The static crackled in her ears as she tried again. Mayday, Mayday. This is Flight 219. We've lost our pilot. This is co-pilot ... I mean, this is temporary control. Requesting emergency assistance. But nothing came. No voice, no signal. Just that endless white noise and the low hum of a dying frequency. Her hands tightened on the controls. Sweat rolled down her back. Her knees knocked slightly, but she didn't let go. Not now. Not when lives depended on her. Behind her, the air marshal stood like a quiet guard, watching her every move. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His silence meant belief. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "Come on, Dad, tell me what to do." And then, faintly so faintly, she thought maybe she imagined it, a voice broke through the static. Flight ... 219. Repeat. NAME pilot ... double quotes. Her eyes widened. She leaned closer to the radio. This is Flight 219. We have no captain. I'm flying the aircraft. My name is Zara Amir. There was silence for a second. Then the voice came again, this time steady, slower, clearer. Zara ... Amir, you're not Amir Quraysh's daughter, she gasped. Her hands froze. Yes, she whispered. He was my father. The voice on the other end paused, but not from disbelief, more from emotion. This is Captain Tariq Hussein. I flew with your father. Karachi to Dubai ... Lahore to London. We were brothers in the skies. He was the best. Her heart clenched. For a moment, the cockpit faded. All she could hear was her father's voice laughing, calling her Captain Zara as she played on the simulator in their basement. He taught me how to fly, she said softly. I know I'm not certified. I'm just 14. But I've trained for this moment my whole life. Captain Tariq's voice changed. The fear was gone. There was steel in it now. Then listen to me, Zara. You've got about 60 nautical miles before you enter restricted airspace. That's a military zone. If they detect a rogue plane with no proper response, they will shoot it down. You need to turn now, mark heading 240, and descend to 19,000 feet. Do you copy? Copy, she replied. Her fingers moved across the panel. She turned the knob, adjusted the heading, and gently brought the plane into a new angle. Heading 240, descending to 19,000. Good, he said. You're doing great. How's your fuel? She glanced at the panel. The gauge flickered between amber and red. Low. Not critical, but low. Understood, said Captain Tariq. Now, what's your speed? Approximately 460 knots, reduced to 410, he said calmly. We'll need to save every ounce of fuel. She adjusted the throttle slowly. The engine groaned, then settled. Captain Tariq stayed with her. He guided her through the pressure checks, the air balance, and even the wind corrections. Every instruction came with calm, patient detail. She followed every word like it was gospel. Her hands were steady now. Her fear had changed into focus. Behind her, the air marshal finally spoke. You're really doing this, kid, she nodded, not taking her eyes off the instruments. How do you know what all these buttons mean? Dad showed me. Every night. 4 years. He leaned closer and whispered, he must be proud right now. She blinked, hard. I hope so. Suddenly, a sharp ding interrupted the moment. A red light lit up on the panel. She checked it instantly. That's our fuel reserve warning. It started early. What does that mean? The air marshal asked. It means we're burning fuel faster than we thought. We need to find the nearest place to land. She turned to the radio. Captain Tariq, we have an early reserve fuel alert. We might not make 60 miles. His voice came back, fast and direct. Understood? Hold position. Let me talk to traffic control. For a full minute, Zara flew in silence. Below them, the clouds were thinning. The sun was lower now, casting orange hues over the tips of the wings. Somewhere back in the cabin, children cried. A woman recited prayers. A man shouted at no one, but none of that touched her. She was in the sky, locked into her mission. The radio crackled again. Zara, there's a small airfield, 32 miles southwest. Civilian but functional. It has one strip long enough for a 737. It's a tight squeeze, but you can do it. Coordinates, she asked. Mark heading 222 and descend to 14,000 feet. She adjusted quickly. I'm on it. Her hands moved smoothly now, almost without thinking. Her brain had gone into a trance-like zone. Everything she had ever learned, every button, every gauge, every diagram came back to her. She wasn't just a scared girl anymore, she was a pilot. The air marshal looked at her in disbelief. You're flying a 737 to an emergency strip. That's the plan, she replied. And we'll need flaps soon. Flaps. They help slow the aircraft for landing. But too soon and we stall. Too late and we overshoot. And how do you know when's right? Phil, she said. It's always about feel. Suddenly the plane jerked. A pocket of air dropped them several feet. Screams erupted in the cabin. Luggage tumbled. A tray hit the cockpit door with a bang. But Zara kept her grip. We're okay, she said, more to herself than anyone. Just turbulence. As they neared the coordinates, Captain Tariq returned. Zara, I've patched in your location to ground radar. You'll be visible. To the airfield team, In about 3 minutes, they'll have flares ready. Understood, she said. Winds southwest at 12 knots. You'll feel it on descent. Don't overcorrect. Copy. The airport came into view, a tiny line on a stretch of dirt surrounded by empty hills. No big towers, no flashing lights, just one little runway and a few workers holding red signal sticks. She felt her breath catch. It's so small. You've got this, said Captain Tariq. Just like your dad taught you. She began the descent, her voice steady. Flaps down to 15. The plane groaned. The angle shifted. Her fingers danced across the switches. Landing gear down. Another bang. A vibration. A new warning light. It's just wind shear, she told herself. Hold steady. Then a voice from the rear. A little girl had walked to the cockpit door, holding a teddy bear. Her cheeks were tear-streaked. Are we gonna die? She asked. Zara turned her head slightly and smiled. Not today. The girl just stared at her. You're a kid like me. No, Zara said gently. Right now, I'm your pilot. And with that, she pushed the nose slightly down, eyes locked on the runway. Her hands didn't shake. Her heart didn't race. She was flying her father's legacy, and she would land this plane. As the runway neared, Captain Tariq's voice returned one last time. This is the most courageous thing I've seen in 30 years in the sky. Whatever happens, Zara, you've already made history. She pressed the intercom. Brace for landing, she said calmly, and then silence. The wheels neared the ground. The clouds vanished. The passengers held their breath, but just before touchdown a warning beep, something she hadn't expected. She glanced quickly, and what she saw made her blood run cold. She stared at the small blinking light, the word fuel glowing an ominous red. Her heart pounded. The engine was still running, but the gauge was dangerously low. She remembered what Captain Zion, the man on the radio, had said. If she didn't make the right turn in 60 seconds, she would enter restricted airspace. The consequences of that were beyond anything she could handle. But to make that turn, she'd have to lose even more altitude, and the turbulence was already rocking the plane like a leaf in a storm. Turn now, Zion's voice came again. Listen to me. Trust me. But she didn't reply. Instead, she closed her eyes for 1 second and saw her father's face. Calm, smiling, with his hand gently resting on her shoulder. What do you do when fear controls your hands? He had asked her once during their training. Think of what you know, not what you feel. She had replied like a student, and she remembered what he told her after that. Then you're already a pilot. She opened her eyes. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her mind was clear. She had memorized every switch, every dial, every number that mattered. She looked out of the cockpit window. The storm had slightly eased up, but dark clouds still loomed like a threat. I'm making the turn, she said firmly, into the headset. The plane banked hard to the left. The passengers behind screamed again, some clutching their seats, others praying. But a few had noticed by now something was different. The voice that had come on the intercom earlier was not a man's. It was a young girl's. Dot in row 10. A teenage boy who had been live streaming the chaos, whispered to his friend. That voice? Was that a kid? No one answered him. Dot in the cockpit. She adjusted her altitude slightly, watching the altimeter fall slowly. Her eyes flicked to the horizon. The clouds were parting. Ahead, she saw a thin strip of coastline. She knew what it was, an emergency airfield, only used by military or rescue flights. I see it, she said. Zion's voice sounded surprised. You do? Yes. I'm bringing us in, but I'm low on fuel. You can do this, he replied, his voice softer now. I trained your father. He would be proud. Those words hit her chest like a wave, but she couldn't let emotion take over. Not now. Back in the cabin, the air marshal had finally told the passengers what was happening. She's not a crew member, he said. She's a passenger, but she's trained. Her father was a pilot. She's the only reason we're still in the air. Silence spread like a wildfire. Some didn't believe it. Others were too shocked to speak. An old man with tears in his eyes began to clap slowly, and soon the entire cabin joined in. But she couldn't hear them. She was fighting wind speeds, cloud cover, and the pressure of 180 lives. Her fingers tightened on the controls. The runway was close, but the last stretch was the hardest dot. As she approached, a new warning flashed. Wind shear, sudden gusts. She felt the plane drop a few feet. Her body lifted slightly in the seat. Her breath caught. I'm coming in too fast, she muttered. Flaps full, gear down, trim to compensate. Zion instructed gently. She followed each step, heart racing. The plane leveled for a moment and, then a harsh gust slammed into the left wing. The plane tilted. She fought back with the yoke, leveling the nose again. Easy. You got this. Zion's voice whispered like her father's. The wheels touched once, then bounced. Her eyes were locked. Hands steady. No panic. She held her breath. The second touch was smooth. The brakes screeched. Reverse thrust. The plane slowed. Slower still, and finally, it stopped. Dead silence filled the cockpit. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Sweat pouring down her back. You did it, Zion said after what felt like a lifetime. You brought her home. Still shaking, she removed the headset and stood up. When she opened the cockpit door, the entire cabin gasped. There stood a girl, barely a teenager. A mother clutched her baby tighter. A man covered his mouth in disbelief, and then someone began to clap again, louder, stronger. The air marshal saluted her, but she didn't speak. She simply walked back to her seat and sat down, staring at her father's photo tucked between the pages of his logbook. Outside, rescue teams ran to the aircraft. Reporters had already heard of the emergency. Cameras flashed. Inside, the passengers were guided off. But they all stopped to look at her. Is it true? One woman asked softly. You flew us. The girl nodded, eyes still red, voice still small. I didn't want to, I just had to. As she was led outside last by the crew, the sunlight broke through the storm clouds. One by one, the passengers applauded again. Some wept, others smiled, and as the camera zoomed in on her face, she looked at the runway, then up at the sky. And whispered, Did you see that, Dad? But just as the screen was about to fade to black, a man stepped forward from the rescue team. He had a badge military, and he was staring at her with wide eyes. He pulled a photo from his vest, one of her father, and asked softly, Is that your dad? She froze, because the photo wasn't just of her father, it was of her father standing next to someone she had never seen before but who looked exactly like her. She couldn't move. The photo in the man's hand didn't lie. Her father was in uniform, standing beside another man taller, older, and with a face strikingly similar to hers. Same eyes, same nose, but it wasn't her. It was someone else. A woman. She blinked. That's not me, she whispered. The man stepped closer. No, it's not. It's your mother. 1,000 questions exploded in her head. That's impossible, she said, voice cracking. I never knew her. Dad said she died when I was born. The man nodded slowly. That's what we were told to, but things weren't as simple as that. Around them, the airfield buzzed with rescue activity, but she was no longer aware of the cameras or the crowd. All she saw was that photograph. All she heard was her heartbeat. Who are you? She asked finally. He said, offering his hand gently. I served with your father and your mother. Both of them were pilots. Some of the best we ever trained. She was a pilot, Rehan nodded. She flew more missions than most men in our unit, and she was fearless. But she disappeared on an assignment when you were just a baby. They found wreckage. Everyone thought she had died. Your father never stopped searching. That's why he never joined another crew. That's why he always flew solo after that. The girl's knees gave way, and she sat on the edge of the runway, her hands trembling. The sun now shone full above them, but her world had turned gray again. She's dead, she asked quietly. Rehan shook his head. We don't know. Not for sure. The photo you're seeing now is from after the crash. From a surveillance file. It surfaced 2 weeks ago. Until today, we didn't believe it was real. Why are you telling me this now? She whispered. Why today? He looked at her, gently. Because the moment you landed that plane, we knew exactly who you were. Not just Zion's daughter. Not just a survivor, but the child of 2 legends. That blood you carry it. What you did today. It's something even seasoned pilots might not have pulled off. She stared at the ground. I don't feel like a legend. He crouched down beside her. Legends never do. That's what makes them different from heroes. Her mind was spinning. If her mother was alive, why hadn't she returned? Why hadn't she come for her? The questions kept coming, one after another, but there were no answers yet, just fragments of truth and pain. The air marshal from the plane walked over, holding a satellite phone. It's Zion, he said softly. He wants to talk to you. She took the phone, her voice shaking. Hello, you're safe, Zion said gently. I'm proud of you. Thank you, she whispered. They showed me a photo of my mom. There was a pause. I know, he said. I saw that file too, but I didn't want to overwhelm you while you were in the cockpit. She's alive. I don't know, but I believe she might be. She swallowed hard. Then I need to find her. Zion sighed. There are others who can handle that. Intelligence teams, military contacts. You're just a kid. No, she replied, standing slowly. I'm not just a kid. I flew a plane full of people through a storm with no fuel and no training. I'm her daughter, and I deserve answers. Rehan placed a hand on her shoulder. You're not alone in this. If you want to search, I'll help you, but it won't be easy. Nothing worth it ever is, she said. The airport staff escorted her into a building for rest, but as she passed through the hall, the passengers from the flight stood silently. Watching her one by one, they stepped forward. A woman placed her hand on the girl's cheek. You saved my son. A man in uniform saluted her. An elderly couple embraced her gently, and the teenage boy who had been filming all along stopped her before she could walk away. He handed her his phone. I recorded everything, he said. Everyone needs to see what you did. She took the phone, hesitated, and then nodded. Just don't make me out to be a hero. I'm not one, he smiled. Too late, the footage went viral. News stations all over the world aired clips of the young girl in the cockpit, her steady hands on the controls, her voice on the intercom, the passengers clapping, the landing. The moment she walked out, headlines read, Teenage girl saves Flight 307, daughter of pilots performs miracle landing. Mystery of missing pilot resurfaces after heroic landing. People everywhere wanted interviews, reporters flooded the base. But she ignored them all. She stayed with Colonel Rayhan, going through old military records, black box reports, satellite photos. One evening, days after the landing, Rayhan handed her a sealed folder. "Your father gave this to me," he said. "Before his last flight, he said if anything ever happened to him, and if you ever showed signs of becoming like him, I should give you this." She opened the folder with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter. "My brave girl. If you're reading this, then I'm probably not with you anymore, and I'm sorry, but I want you to know something. You were never alone. Every night I flew, I carried your photo in my cockpit. You kept me strong. I never told you everything about your mother, because the truth was too heavy for a child. But now, you're not a child anymore. You proved that. You carry her spirit, and mine. I have no doubt that one day, you'll find her, and when you do, tell her, I never stopped loving her, not for a single breath. Fly high, sweetheart. I'll always be with you." Somewhere in the clouds, her eyes flooded with tears as she held the letter to her chest. For the first time in days, she let herself cry. But it wasn't just sadness, it was strength too, because she now knew who she was. Not just a passenger, not just a scared girl. She was the daughter of a pilot, who never gave up, and a mother who had vanished into mystery. The only thing left now was to fly again. But as she closed the folder, Rayhan's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his eyes widened. He handed it to her. "There's been a sighting," he said, "in northern Afghanistan. A woman matching your mother's description. Same scar, same pendant." She froze. "Is it her?" she whispered. Rayhan didn't answer. He just said, "We leave at sunrise." The cockpit was filled with flashing red lights. The storm outside was no longer something they could avoid. The sky was black, wild with thunder and lightning. Winds slammed against the plane like angry fists. Rain hammered the windows so hard that the glass trembled. The girl sat in the co-pilot's seat, drenched in sweat, hands shaking but still steady on the controls. The pilot's seat beside her remained empty. She had taken over completely now. No one else was left to do it. Behind her, the air marshal stood silently, ready to help if needed, though he knew this was no longer something he could understand or control. Everyone else had trusted her. They had no choice. She was their last hope. Her heart raced like a drum in a battlefield. "Come on," she whispered to herself. "We can do this. You taught me this." Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Don't panic. You're not flying the storm. You're flying through it." She gritted her teeth as another burst of wind jolted the plane. The altimeter spun wildly for a moment before correcting itself. She adjusted the throttle, trying to stabilize their descent. In the cabin, passengers were screaming and praying. Some held hands. A mother rocked her baby, whispering lullabies through tears. A teenager was recording the chaos on his phone, thinking this might be his last video. An elderly man closed his eyes and clutched a photo of his wife. Amid the panic, a quiet kind of unity formed. People from different lives, races, and beliefs were now bound by a single thread: hope in the hands of a girl. No one knew when the flight began. The tower was still out of range. The signal had returned briefly during Part 10, just enough for the girl to hear from her father's old friend, Captain Billow, who had guided her toward the emergency airfield. But now, there was only static again. She checked the fuel. It was dangerously low enough for one final attempt at landing. Maybe. Suddenly, a crack of lightning blinded the windows. For a second, everything went white. Then came the sound, sharp, metallic, terrifying. The right wing had been hit. The plane tilted violently. The oxygen masks dropped again. Alarms screamed. The girl gripped the yoke with all her strength and pushed back against the wind. Her arms trembled, her lungs burned, but she didn't let go. She couldn't. She tapped into everything her father had taught her in their living room simulator. If it tilts right, counter it gently from the left. Never overcorrect. Let the aircraft breathe. Trust it. Don't force it. You're not fighting the sky, you're dancing with it. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls, adjusting the flaps. The plane groaned as if crying in pain, but it started leveling out. Behind her, the air marshal whispered, "You're doing it, kid, you're doing it." "I'm not done yet," she replied, teeth clenched. "Not until we're on the ground." Just then, through the thick clouds, a faint blinking light appeared in the distance. The runway. It was real. They had reached it. But the wind wasn't done with them. Crosswinds whipped the aircraft from side to side. The girl began the approach. Landing gear check, flaps check, speed too high. She adjusted. Another jolt. The plane dropped slightly, as if it had stepped on nothing. Gasps came from the cabin, but she held on. Her eyes stayed fixed on the runway, even though tears blurred her vision. "This is for you, Dad," she whispered. The final descent was like a war. The storm fought her every inch of the way. Trees below bent like grass. The emergency lights of the airfield flashed frantically, guiding her down. The landing strip was narrow, soaked in rain, surrounded by mud. One mistake, one slip, and the plane would slide off into disaster. But she didn't blink. Her focus was sharp as a blade. She began to count 300 feet, 200, 150. The passengers were silent now. The kind of silence that happens just before a miracle or a tragedy. Feet. The wheels were inches from the ground. 70. She pulled back slightly, 50, her breath held. 30. The plane touched down. There was a screech of tires. The cabin shook violently. Overhead bins burst open. Bags flew. The baby cried. But the girl held the yoke, keeping it straight, guiding the aircraft down the wet runway with everything she had. Water splashed high against the windows. The brakes hissed. She prayed. Then dash. Finally dash. The plane stopped. Silence. For a few seconds. No one moved. No one spoke. Just the sound of rain on the roof. Then a baby cried again. Someone gasped. A flight attendant fainted. And slowly, as the realization sank in, the passengers began to applaud. Clap after clap, louder and louder, like a wave of relief crashing through the cabin. Tears, laughter, even shouts of disbelief echoed. The girl sat frozen, her hands still on the controls, her shoulders heaving. The air marshal touched her arm gently. You did it. She looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. We landed. We landed. Emergency crews began approaching from both sides. Red and blue lights flashed in the storm. Ground staff rushed up the stairways. The door opened. Cool night air swept in. Paramedics checked on the pilot and the crew. One by one, the passengers began to disembark, some crying, some hugging strangers. Many looked back at the cockpit, searching for the one who saved them, and there she was. A girl in a hoodie, now soaked in sweat and rain. Not a pilot, not an officer, just a teenager. Someone they hadn't even noticed when the flight began. A woman stopped near the door and asked, "Who are you?" The girl looked down for a moment, then slowly stood up. Her voice was soft, but steady. "I'm Alina. My dad was a pilot. He taught me everything." The woman blinked. "You flew this plane?" Alina nodded. "But how?" "I didn't want to," she whispered. "I had to." Outside, news crews were arriving. Cameras were already flashing. Authorities were stunned, but no one stopped to question her yet. The passengers were still too busy hugging her. A young boy clung to her leg. "You're like a superhero," he said. She smiled weakly. "No, I just did what I could." Captain Billow's voice crackled faintly through the headset again. "Alina, are you safe?" She lifted the mic, her voice trembling. "We landed." There was silence for a moment. Then his voice, full of emotion. "Your father would be so proud of you." She closed her eyes and let the tears fall. The storm outside was finally fading, but inside her, a different storm had ended too. The storm of doubt, of grief, of fear. She had faced it all and won. But even as people celebrated and camera flashes lit up the scene, one thought kept repeating in her mind. What if the lightning had hit the other wing? What if the controls had failed? What if the landing gear hadn't worked? What if she had failed? The fear still lingered, quietly, but she pushed it aside. For now, they were alive, and that mattered. She stepped out of the plane at last, her shoes splashing in the water, her hoodie clinging to her. She looked up at the dark sky, the final drops of rain falling like a curtain closing on a long, possible act. But somewhere deep inside her, a new chapter had already begun. The emergency lights flashed against the wet tarmac as the airplane finally slowed down. The tires screeched and smoked, but it had landed. Safely, somehow, miraculously, it had landed. Fire trucks rushed from the sides. Medical teams ran with stretchers. But what they saw inside the plane wasn't chaos. It was calm. Unbelievable, silent calm. The passengers sat frozen. Some were crying, some were still holding hands. Some were praying, but every single one of them was alive. And all eyes slowly turned to the cockpit door. It opened gently, and stepping out wasn't a captain in uniform. It wasn't a seasoned co-pilot. It was her, a 14-year-old girl, soaked in sweat, her face pale, hands trembling slightly. But her eyes, they were steady, calm like the sky after a long storm. She walked slowly down the aisle. Nobody said a word. Nobody even breathed too loudly. As she passed by, passengers looked at her like she was someone they couldn't understand. A quiet old woman reached out and touched the girl's arm gently, like she was touching a ghost. "You saved us," she whispered. The girl didn't answer. She just gave a small nod, eyes still locked ahead. Step after step, she walked toward the open cabin door, where emergency workers were waiting, confused. A medic tried to stop her. "Miss, are you okay? Were you flying with someone? Are you hurt?" She shook her head gently. "I was flying with my dad," she said softly. "But he passed away." The medic blinked. "I'm sorry to hear that, but wait, were you flying alone?" She nodded. "I came here alone, but the captain... How did the plane land?" the medic asked. The girl didn't respond. Her voice had already spoken enough. A man in a dark blue uniform stepped forward. His badge read Airport Security Chief. He held a tablet, eyes moving fast through the passenger list. "There's no registered pilot alive from this flight. We have no active crew in control. Our system shows the aircraft landed by autopilot override and manual assist. But there's no crew listed capable of doing that." He stopped talking the moment he looked into her eyes. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. She looked at him with a calm that felt ancient, like it didn't belong to a child. "My name's Aisha," she said. "My dad was Captain Amir Remen." The officer blinked. "Captain Remen, the pilot who died last year, in that mountain crash, Batman. He was a legend." She smiled faintly. "He was my father." You mean to say..." You flew this aircraft. She hesitated. I did what I had to do. Reporters had arrived now. Cameras were flashing. Microphones pushed forward. Can you tell us what happened? Did you land the plane alone? Are you a trained pilot? Are you really just 14? Questions flew at her like arrows, but she didn't answer. Instead, she looked up at the sky. The clouds had cleared. The sun was beginning to rise. Golden light bathed the runway, like the heavens were proud. Behind her, the passengers were now exiting the plane. One by one, they passed her, and many paused. Some whispered thank you, others just cried. A mother held her baby close and mouthed the words, "You saved my daughter." A businessman who had earlier ignored her on the flight said nothing, just gave her a long, respectful nod. The elderly man who had been panicking and yelling during turbulence placed a hand on his heart and bowed slightly as he passed. Then came the air marshal, the one who had trusted her. He walked up slowly and stood beside her. "You did it," he said, voice low. "You flew us home." She turned to him. "I didn't do it alone," she said. "My father was there. In my head, every step. Every second." The marshal's eyes softened. Then he must be proud. Wherever he is, airport staff guided them toward the terminal. But before she could take another step, a young reporter rushed forward and shoved a mic in her face. "What made you step into that cockpit? How did you even know what to do?" She paused. "When you lose someone who believes in you, the world forgets who you are. But I remembered. He trained me. He told me one day you might be alone up there. If that day comes, don't be afraid of the sky. Become part of it." There was silence. Not just among the press, but across social media. The footage was already being uploaded. Passengers had recorded her stepping out of the cockpit. Her name was trending. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag the girl who landed. Hashtag Skydaughter. Hashtag Aisha the pilot. Millions were watching, but she wasn't thinking about the world. She was thinking of that last moment in the cockpit, right before the wheels touched down. The moment she whispered, "This is for you, Baba." In the terminal, a small boy ran up to her. "Are you the girl who saved us?" She smiled and knelt. "I just did what someone taught me to do. Be brave, even when it's scary." "I want to be like you," he said. "You can," she said gently. "Just listen when someone tells you're stronger than you think." Behind her, airport staff formed a quiet line of respect as she passed. Pilots from other airlines stood at attention, not because of her age, but because they knew what she had just done wasn't just brave, it was historic. Her phone vibrated. A text message appeared. Unknown number. Just one line. He would have been proud. "Captain Samir, your dad's co-pilot, 2016. Her eyes welled up, but she didn't let the tears fall. She walked outside, where the world was already watching. Reporters, drones, people holding posters, some with flowers. One said, "You gave us hope again." Another said, "Not all heroes wear uniforms." Later that night, as she sat in a quiet hotel room given by the airline, she looked at the old flight logbook of her father. She turned the last page. And there it was. A handwritten note. "To my daughter Aisha. If the sky ever turns dark, remember your heart knows the way home." She closed the book gently and smiled. Outside, the news anchors spoke her name. Like a legend and an unbelievable story of courage and skill, a 14-year-old girl has landed a commercial aircraft safely with over 180 passengers on board after both pilots became unresponsive. Experts say the maneuver she pulled off was something even trained pilots might fail. When asked how she did it, she said, "I listened to my father, and somewhere, in the silence between sky and earth, a voice whispered, 'You did good, Aisha. You flew like a